Right across North America, momentum is building for a boost to the minimum wage. In Canada, several provinces have started hiking. It's also shaping up to now become a federal election issue.
The NDP will be putting on the table a plan so that within our first mandate, we will get the federal minimum wage to $15.
The new Democrat proposal would start at $12, rising gradually to $15 by 2019 if the party takes office after this fall's federal election. Alberta's newly elected NDP government under Rachel Notley has pledged to raise the province's minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2018. And on June 1st, the Northwest Territories raised its minimum wage to $12.50, now the highest in Canada. Ontario's rate jumps 25 cents to $11.25 on October 1st. Time for the big picture. Bill Robson is the president and CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. Goldie Hyder, president and CEO of Hill & Knowlton Strategies Canada. And pinch hitting for Armin today, Angela McEwen, economist with the Canadian Labour Congress. Great to have all of you with us. Angela, I'm going to start with you, and let's start with the minimum wage, but I think it may take us other places in terms of other ways to achieve the same goal. Is raising the minimum wage a job killer, which is what some would say, and particularly a job killer for those on the fringes like young people or those with lower skills?
That's a great question, and it's usually one that comes up when you hear about rising minimum wages. Research in Canada shows that the employment effects are much smaller than usually anticipated, and they're usually confined to teenagers. So there are some employment effects for teenagers, but for most minimum wage workers who are over the age of 20, there aren't employment effects. And what we find is that raising wages increases productivity of workers, it lowers turnover, and you actually get this increasing productivity, this virtuous cycle that makes businesses more productive and more successful.
So, Bill, do you agree that raising the minimum wage is the right thing to do? It's a I guess a roundabout way of transferring wealth between citizens, in this case companies, to employees.
Well, because of the Alberta proposal to look at some kind of minimum income, guaranteed annual income idea, to me it seems like we got the kind of whatever easy hit solution on the one side, the minimum wage, versus the much smarter way of thinking about this, which is to look at ways of in supporting people at the lower end through the tax and transfer system and work at it that way, because a minimum wage hike is going to help people who have jobs and who keep their jobs at minimum wage, and some teenagers will lose theirs, and some other people as well. I mean, low-skilled, more marginal part-time people are the ones that are going to get squeezed out. Whereas if you think of other ways of doing the same thing, you can have a much more comprehensive way of trying to even out some of the income disparities. But again, the minimum wage thing, it looks easy for the reason that you said. You know, somebody else pays. The people who lose their jobs don't have a lot of political clout. The guaranteed annual income approach, it's harder, but in the long run, it's a more sensible, promising way of thinking about it.
So let's talk about that, Goldie. I mean, that is the guaranteed annual income is something else that has been brought up. I suspect we will talk more about it. And when I say we, I mean every Western nation that's facing this weird combination of high corporate profits and reduced labor force because of things like robotics and artificial intelligence. What do we do about that? One thing is a guaranteed annual income. Is that an idea you think whose time has come?
Well, it's certainly worthy of the debate that we're having, and I want to credit Andrew Coyne out there in the National Post, who's written quite extensively about it, and I know it's being picked up by others. I think the point there that's being made is it's in some ways a logical extension of the social safety net that we've built here in Canada. It'll be a shared, in terms of costs, obviously, whether you're saying the government's paying for it or the taxpayers paying for it or businesses are paying for it, it's us ultimately that's paying for it. Do we want to do that? And is that the better way to address the real issue here? Because the market, which I'm a big believer in, can do a lot of great things, but one thing we've seen is it's not been very good at creating an equal distribution or a just distribution of income as we're discussing now.
Angela, what's your take on the guaranteed annual income versus, I guess, raising the minimum wage, or can they work in concert?
Well, exactly. I don't think it's an either-or situation. I think both the minimum wage and a guaranteed annual income are part of a broader package of solutions that we need. I mean, let's take a minute to think about why is there all of this pressure to raise the minimum wage or to implement a guaranteed annual income. It's because of rising inequality. And while a guaranteed annual income sounds fantastic because it would reach more people, there's something interesting about the distribution of market income. When you have this huge inequality in the distribution of market income, it increases the bargaining power of the rich. And what we see is not a trickle down, which is what we thought we would have in the 80s, But we see the opposite happening, where rules get put in place that benefit the wealthy, and inequality is in fact self-reinforcing. And so market wages matter to a certain extent. And so things like the minimum wage that help equalize market wages also help improve the bargaining power of lower wage workers.
But the minimum wage doesn't equalize income because some people end up with no jobs.
Well,
so
that's not true. Maybe some people don't get hired. What research has shown is that hiring for teenagers slows. But people don't lose their jobs.
Some of them don't get jobs.
That's an interesting idea. It's a good story.
I have to say,
but the facts don't bear it out.
No, I agree with what you said earlier. It does affect the employment of some people. My first job was in food service, and it was at minimum wage, and minimum wage for food service, which is lower in the first place, which sort of acknowledges the problem. And so there are people who are going to lose their jobs. Periodically on the show, we talk about high youth unemployment. We should bring these two segments together, because if you raise the minimum wage, the people who are hit the hardest are young people who don't yet have a lot of skills, and for a lot of us it was our way into the labor market. So I think that looking at the more income distribution approach is better. If you hike the minimum wage, the guaranteed annual income is going to have to be there to bail out some of the people that won't get jobs.
So let's focus on, the only thing I would add to that, Angela, as well, is that most of us who worked those minimum wage jobs when we were teenagers were paying for school, and so if you drop that off, some people wouldn't be able to actually improve their lot in life. I don't know what the numbers would be, but there would be some portion of people whose lives would be dramatically changed by not having that minimum wage job.
That's actually, again, the research doesn't bear that out. But what's interesting is that there is this myth that most minimum wage workers are going to school or living at home with their parents. And the fact of the matter is that your average minimum wage worker is a woman, a head of the household, not going to school of any kind. And not living at home with their parents. So
I don't think either Bill and I were suggesting that
minimum
wage workers are
workers.
teenagers. It's just that we've all agreed that those are the ones most likely hit by the lost jobs or missing jobs. We've only got a minute here, Goldie. We're talking about guaranteed annual income versus minimum wage. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think I've said we're certainly ready to have the conversation around the guaranteed minimum income as a way forward. I don't believe, as we've all agreed, it's an either or. But I will say this about the minimum wage issue. 5% is what we're talking about, the people who are affected by the minimum wage. And we think we're talking about just them. What we need to be careful of because wages change, they only go one direction, they go up. But there will be a ripple effect. There will be a distribution issue for all other levels. And that means as those incomes rise, are we really changing the inequality during that discussion? Which is why I don't think we're addressing the core issue here, which has more to do with minimum
Isn't
incomes.
that a good thing, Bill? I agree with Goldie that you raise the floor and you're going to raise the middle too, but isn't that actually a desirable outcome?
Well, not if you're cutting off the bottom rungs on the ladder. There's already a lot of retail where you're checking out automatically at the machine. There's already a lot of vending machines who've replaced people who could be doing food service. If we want to see more of that, raise the minimum wage, and we will.
All right, we got to leave it there, guys, but it is a great debate, and I'm sure we're going to be having it again. Bill Robson, Goldie Hyder, and Angela McEwen, thanks to you all.